right, what's going on, Ramley? Welcome back to the Ram Skinny here on the LAFB network. We have a very special guest. It has been quite some time, but we got him to dust the microphone off as he was just saying, my man, Sosa Kremenjas, the NFL guru for Underdog. Formerly, you know him, Locked On Rams, PFF, did a little bit of everything. Turf show times way back in the day. So our favorite brother from up north of the Ramley, Big Sos. What's up, man? How you doing?
Oh man, I'm doing well. It's good to be back. Tough times here for Canadians with the World Series ending. I know a lot of our LA folks are feeling pretty good. Oddly enough, I am wearing an LA hat as well, which is crazy. So, but no, everything's good, man. It's good to be back in these streets a little bit. Dusted the mic off and, ready to chop it up about Rams ball.
I wasn't going to bring it up, but since you did, I mean, World Series, pretty epic. Are you a pretty diehard Blue Jays fan? Was that a rough going?
I'm actually not a baseball guy at all, but I'll always root for the hometown team. So I was watching that series, crazy series, but in typical Toronto fashion, we found a way to blow it. So tough, but in my lifetime, we haven't been in the World Series, so it's pretty cool regardless.
I think the thing that did you in was when Vladdy Jr. wore the Austin Matthews Toronto Maple Leafs jersey to whatever game that was. I think it was just game one, which you guys dominated, but I think that did them in with the Maple Leafs juju there, unfortunately.
It might have. Yeah, you're right.
But good stuff. But Skinny got it. What's up? How you doing, Skinny T? What's up?
Doing great. As always, 49ers week. It's always a weird one.
Yeah. Fun one. Always rivalry week. So, well, really appreciate the time talking all things Rams. This team I think has been, obviously a very good football team. There's been some up and downs and whatnot, but overall, I think they're one of the top teams in the NFC. But just how do you see it? Obviously, always all plugged in. Like, where do you see this Rams team kind of sitting within the NFC and the NFL as a whole ecosystem?
Yeah, so I think for anyone that's followed me, some people called me biased. I genuinely do think that the Rams are the best team in the NFL. And, I'm sure a lot of people feel that same way about at least a handful of teams right now. I think you could make the case that the Seahawks contingent probably feels the same way. And 49ers fans, despite the fact that that defense is banged up, they might feel the same way. And obviously, a list of teams, the Bills and whatnot. So, to me, I just see a team that's just really complete. That defense is going into the season. There was a lot of question marks, obviously, in the secondary and the cornerback room. And, I think even for me, even in season, I was questioning whether we had necessarily the right guys in the room to be able to fully compete. But I think when you pair it with the defensive line and the upgrades at linebacker, and you start to see some of these corners playing a lot better in recent weeks, like a Darius Williams, for example. I think Emmanuel Forbes, too, has done a good job recently just developing on the fly. It starts to make me really believe that this team can seriously compete. And obviously on the offensive side of the ball, I think, when it comes down to it, like not only are they a productive offense, not only do I trust Sean McVay more than any other head coach in terms of not just the culture in the locker room, but, being creative and being able to scheme offense when times get difficult. But when it comes down to it, I look at Matthew Stafford as not just a MVP candidate, and in my opinion, the favorite right now, but a guy that, if you're on the road or if you're, in the fourth quarter, game on the line, 2 minutes left in the game, like, is there a quarterback that you'd rather have playing right now than Matthew Stafford? And I don't know that I necessarily could say yes. And I know, again, same thing, you could make the case for Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes or some of these other guys, but that's just such a rare quality that Stafford has. And, I think about the last two playoff trips that the Rams had where they shouldn't have been in those games. I don't think, like the teams just weren't all that talented necessarily. You could see that there was a legitimate talent gap between the teams that they played, but they pushed the Eagles more than any other team did in the playoffs last year, and they probably should have won, to be quite honest with you, or should have at least been leading had they not had a miscommunication there on the offensive line. And then the year prior, same thing, they go to Detroit and clearly are not favored in any regard, and same thing, take it right down to the wire. And a lot of people thought it was a missed PI flag there on the fourth down to Puka Nacua. I don't know why I still remember that, but like this is a team that's always exceeded above expectations. And now when I finally look at it, I think the roster and the talent has caught up to where not only are they going to compete in the playoffs, but I genuinely think like if this team can try to get themselves in a position to where they're, a top 2 or 3 seed and they can really force teams to have to come to Los Angeles and stay home, I think that's just a different story. So, we'll see how the rest of this kind of season plays out. And it's going to be a really interesting case study for the next few weeks to see how good this team really is, because it's one thing to beat up on, the Saints versus all these teams that they have coming up, the Seahawks twice, San Fran this week, of course, and then Tampa and Detroit and all these other really good teams. And we'll get a good gauge for what they are. But I believe in this team for sure.
Yeah, so we just had the NFL trade deadline come and go, and the Rams did not make a move at the deadline. They obviously bring in Roger McCreary to kind of patch some holes in the secondary. We saw other NFL teams, other competitors really go after players. Sauce Gardner to the Colts, interesting move there. Eagles make a couple of moves. Do you think that the Rams made the right decision, not kind of going in their old ways, or standing pat? Is that where they should be?
I think they were kind of left choiceless, to be quite honest with you. When you look at the cap table for next year and all the guys that they have to start paying in the coming 2 seasons, they got to be very mindful of how they're spending their money. So I think that's one thing that probably ruled out a lot of these, big names that a lot of fans were clamoring for. And then of course, we have to have the discussion of Stafford quarterback life, what that looks like. And of course, that's probably why the Rams made the move last year to get out of the first round. And luckily for them, they got Atlanta's first round pick, which is still crazy to me that Atlanta did that deal. But this is now the Rams are in position to potentially have a top 10 pick. So do they take a quarterback this year? I don't know. Could they use one of those first round picks to move out of the first round to get a first rounder the following year? Potentially, but at least it gives them a wealth of resources to be able to start planning for life after Stafford. And, we've been through this roller coaster now for a few years. It feels like where every offseason it's halfway retirement, halfway trade, and then he ends up coming back to Los Angeles anyway. So to me, I'm very mindful of that. If anything, if I was the Rams, I would have made maybe a smaller level deal, something similar to like the McCreary one, where it won't necessarily hamstring your future, but you could look to upgrade, a minor spot here or there. But, in terms of the Rams, when you look at the roster, I just don't see many places where you could plug and play someone. And of course, they weren't going to go after, a Sauce Gardner where it costs that much, or a player of that size, style of caliber, I would say. So for me, it would have been maybe like more of a depth move at and defensive end or something like that, or potentially some people thought a third receiver. I didn't necessarily see the need for that, but if anything, to me it would have been on the defensive side of the ball. But they solved that with McCreary, I think, and you got to feel pretty good about where they're at, I would say.
Yeah, I think we both agree with you. Like I kind of wanted to go after Sauce just for the old glory days of the F them picks, and just for the wild theatrics that it would have brought back in LA. Like the Rams have always been like the forefront of news, it feels like. And the last kind of year, they've been kind of quiet. They haven't really, been making, the Chargers have made more splashes in like trades, which the Chargers have never done. So I was more just wanting that, like, hey, let's get back in front of the news. But I think, you're absolutely right, especially looking at the future. It was the right decision. So as you brought up Stafford, let's double click on him a little bit. I mean, obviously we all know, well documented heading into training camp, all the back drama, and if that was going to linger, and if he was going to miss any games, and how serious it was. And I mean, he might be playing his best ball in the last 10 years. I mean, he just looks like, I don't know if he's on some like Regenix or some like youth fountain of water out here in LA or what's going on, but he just looks like youthful and better. Like, just how impressed have you been with him? And put you on the spot, like you kind of mentioned it, we never know, retiring, not retiring, like could he go like 3 more years?
I mean, I think it's really up to him in terms of how much he wants to play. I don't think the physical aspect of his game is, I have not noticed any drop off in terms of his ability. And like you said, Ryan, like this might be his best football ever, not just in LA. And a lot of people compare it to that 21 season. Of course, that's the year the Rams go to the Super Bowl, and he's off to a hotter start in terms of statistically. And I'm not even going to rely on that necessarily. Just to my eye test, I trust my eyes more than I trust anything else. I'm seeing a guy that's just like fully dialed and locked in, and you just see it week after week. Like he's attempting these passes, the no looks, we know about those. And he talked about it in one of his pressers recently, just like his ability to know how to throw the ball in such a split second decision is so impressive to me, because you see him layer footballs, you see him with the no look when he wants to open up a little more of a window on a guy going across the middle of the field. And Sean McVay mentioned this in his presser too. Like we see the numbers, we see the offense, it's productive, we see them moving up and down the field, and it seems like the red zone issues for the most part have been pretty solved at this point in terms of just getting on the same page in connection with Davante Adams. But he's throwing like no turnover worthy passes. And that's the biggest thing that's, I think, always plagued Stafford, right? He's always been this gunslinger that, yeah, he'll always get near that 5,000 passing yard mark if needed, at least. He's always got, one of the strongest arms in the league, and he's always been head up, just been a really smart football player. But he's always had those little lulls where, even going back to 21, there's a couple games there in that three-week stretch. I think it was in November, if I'm not mistaken. He's thrown 6, 7, 8 picks. And this season, like, sure, he's only got 2, and that looks great, but he's not even putting the ball in harm's way at all this year, which is like really surprising to me. And that's where I think he's elevated his game to a whole nother level that we haven't seen from him. So as long as his wife allows him to play a little longer, I think he probably would want to. But right, yeah, who knows?
Yeah, I mean, it's just been incredible. And that throw to Puka down the right-hand sideline last week, it just reminds you of those old days of him gunslinging like that. But then it's like he's one of the few quarterbacks that will make that throw. And then Puka's just insanely one of the guys that will catch that ball as well. So just a great combo there. And, transitioning to, how they've adjusted their offense, going from, obviously 11 personnel to now more heavier sets, 13 personnel. That kind of debuted without Puka on the field. It continued when Puka was on the field. Obviously, he goes out partway through that game with the rib injury. Seems like he's on track to return for that. But from your eye test, what does this 13 personnel mean to this team? And do you think it's kind of a story for success against some of these defenses that have plagued, like the Fangio defense or the solid defense?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. The more flexibility I think that they have at their disposal on the offensive side of the ball, I think is going to serve them well going deep into the season because, like you mentioned, they've been this 11 personnel team for the vast majority of Sean McVay's tenure and Stafford's overlap there. And, when things are great, they're great, but then you run into that buzzsaw defense that, ultimately gives them some issues and that type of thing, and it stalls pretty badly. I think now, having been essentially forced into that position, like you mentioned, Ryan, with Puka being sidelined in that game, they didn't have much of a choice. And then I believe Tutu Atwell got hurt in that game as well. So they really had to trot out a lot of tight ends, not to mention the weather, obviously, too. So I think them being forced into that position probably opened Sean McVay's eyes a little bit more to know that he's got a lot of talent at his disposal. Not just that, but he's got the ability to mix and match a lot of these looks and really just go on either side of the spectrum here. Like, we're talking about just 2 completely different styles of offenses. So I think it should serve them well going deep into the season when you start to, really, the way I look at it is ultimately the Rams have to get past a certain set of teams when it comes to the playoffs. The regular season is one animal, but when it gets to the playoffs, ultimately it's just a matchup league. And we've seen it, we saw it last year with the Rams and the Vikings game in the playoffs. The Vikings were a great team, but unfortunately for them, they matched up horribly against the Rams. Their offensive line is not good, and the Rams' defensive line was on a historic tear with sacks in the postseason. And just a simple mismatch in one sector of the game there can really flip that. And then the other place where my mind goes is like, okay, then the Rams go in the offseason, they rebuild this defense, and they're not out here adding, these superstar corners or these types of players. They go out and get a Nate Landman, and they go out and get a Puna Ford. And why did they do that? They obviously know that they have to surpass the Eagles at some point. And what did the Eagles do the best? They run the ball. So they go get 2 guys that help them really, adjust that part of their defense. So that's the way my mind goes when I think about like this offensive flexibility is just, certain teams are going to match up well in terms of certain structures on defense and how it looks in an 11 personnel style look. And then certain teams, you're not going to be able to do that. And now, them knowing that they can trot out these bigger looks and really just run the ball and try to control, the time clock and limit possessions on the other side of the ball is very beneficial to them because now they can sort of lean into whichever game plan they think works best in a given week. So
I think that's what's been kind of most exciting about Sean McVay's maturation as, not just a head coach, but as a play caller is, the continued kind of structure and adjustments that he makes. When he first came into not the league, but first became the head coach, we all know the famous like 11 personnel, and that was just the bread and butter, and hey, it worked. Like, got him to a Super Bowl in year 2. So why change it? But now going from, zone running to gap running to power running to 11 personnel, 12 personnel, 13 personnel, like he's really adapting to what the defense is giving him, which I think makes it all the more lethal when they're able to do that. You mentioned the defense, Sosa, and, I'm a believer that when the season's done, Chris Shula will be like a top 5 candidate for a head coaching job. Whether he will get one or not is another story, but I think he'll certainly get interviews. I can't remember a coach, and I don't mean this disrespectfully, but that has done more with less when you just look at big name talent. Obviously, the Rams have talent on defense, especially that front, that front with all the draft picks up there. But, not a single drafted linebacker, all UDFAs. The back end is all guys that were basically castaways when you look at it. I mean, Quentin Lake's a 6th round pick, Akilla Witherspoon, no one wanted him. You look at that and what he's been able to do with this group, like just how awesome is it seeing Chris Shula? And do you think this might be the last year we see Chris Shula on the Rams sidelines?
Yeah, I feel like he may as well probably book his ticket to Miami, right?
Yeah.
I hope it's not. I hope it's one of those situations where, like you said, Ryan, too, I would be stunned if he's not getting at least looks and positions to go interview. But I hope it's one of those situations where he interviews a couple times and it just doesn't pan out. And these teams head in different directions and he ultimately has to come back to LA for another season and then he dips. I think that would be like the best case scenario right now for the Rams. I'm really hoping it's not one of those Brandon Staley situations where he's, the new hottest thing on the block 1 year. You don't even get time to really instill your program and it's out of there. So, but yeah, I mean, the performance on defense has been super impressive. I mean, I think the biggest thing for me is just they play as such a cohesive unit. And I think each layer of that defense is able to build on the one prior, and they do a really good job of making up for the lack of talent, I guess, if that's what you want to call it, right? And you mentioned it too. It's like, a lot of these guys are cast-offs, and a lot of these guys are not first-round picks. And, even looking at the defensive line, Kobe Turner's a 3rd-round pick, and Byron Young was a 3rd-round pick. Like, there's not, the Rams are the 2nd cheapest defense in the NFL, if I recall correctly, actually. So he's not been given, this crazy amount of resources to work with in terms of talent and capital and, all this type of stuff, but he's found a way to make it work. And I think for him too, just schematically, he does a really good job of being able to mix and match his looks. And the only game that I really think about where the Rams kind of frustrated me, I guess, on the defensive side of the ball, unfortunately for, everyone who's a Rams fan, was the San Fran game, that first half. It just felt like the Rams were playing very cautious, and I can understand why they want to keep everything in front and make you earn it. But I think they kind of fell into the trap of how San Fran wants to play. And it was like a tale of two halves, because the first half, it was all drives, long sustained drives for that San Fran offense. And they were able to move the ball and keep the clock, churning. And the Rams had very minimal possessions on offense. And then you could see the halftime adjustments as they came out of half. It was a totally different ball game. So my thing, outside of that game would just be like, continue to play aggressive. And I think if you get beat, that's part of the game. I don't like when these guys just play super cautious on the defensive side of the ball, and I understand why they do it, but I have to take the whole picture into perspective, and I look at the Rams offense and the quarterback. And so if you do get beat, that's an offense that I feel like can strike back and make up for that, lack of position, I guess, if you're put into that position from the defensive side of the ball. So that's for me the biggest thing, but I think just as a whole, the unit's been super impressive. Each layer has a player that's just completely standing out, the defensive line, take your pick, and then Landman at the next level. And of course, Quentin Lake on the back end with everything he's able to do too. So I hope he's back, but I'm bracing for the worst for sure.
What's going on, Ramley? Ryan Dowd here. Before we get to the show, got to tell you quickly about our friends over at Sleeper, #1 sports app right now, and not just for season-long fantasy. They've got live score updates. They've got a chat you can communicate with other users. Plus, the best part is the daily fantasy feature, which is just like a live pick'em. Just choose 2 to 8 players across any sport. Choose more or less, and you can win real money. When you go to make your first deposit right now, use our promo code. You see it right down there, Rams LAFB, all one word. They're going to give you a match bonus up to $100. Put in $100, you get $100 free on top of that to play with. If you only want to deposit 10, they'll match you that 10. You're starting at 20. But wait, right now, any new users automatically get a $20 free entry to play with. No deposit required. However, you can stack that bonus, take that 20, go deposit whatever you choose up to 100 with that promo code RAMSLAFB, and they'll match you that. So now you've got extra free money to go play with. So check it out today. Download the Sleeper app. Tell them the guys over at the Rams LAFB sent you. Now, let's get on to the show.
The offense has been playing so much better the last couple of weeks. I'm on the record for how I was not enjoying the third downs in the red zone. So we don't need to go back into that. But, looking forward, we've got some interesting games coming up over the next 3 weeks, specifically with the 49ers coming up here, which should, on paper, should be an offensive drubbing. Then you got a tough defense and a very explosive offense with Seattle. And then Bucks, who knows how healthy they'll be at that point. But what are your thoughts kind of on the near future of just the next few games?
Yeah, I think as I mentioned earlier, we're really going to find out what this team is capable of here in the next few weeks. So, it starts with this week taking care of San Francisco. It's been a dragon that's been difficult for the Rams to slay for whatever reason for very many years. And I think that's, comes down from a head coaching perspective downward. And, to some extent, probably a little bit mental as well, just knowing that, this is a team similar to the Eagles, that they should have beat. And for whatever reason, they couldn't have. So to me, yeah, we're going to find out what this team is made of over the next few weeks. I think if they can get on track here, I look at this part of the schedule now as not only the most important because it's next up and because, they're difficult teams, but the Rams don't have many NFC wins. They have to really start plugging away at trying to get some of these NFC wins, obviously NFC West wins, because my mind is already thinking about week 17, looking at that playoff seeding kind of calendar and how it shakes out for the Rams. And unfortunately for them, they lose to the Eagles, they lose to the Niners, two teams that they should have beaten. I think if you ask a Rams fan, they'd probably swap those wins happily with the Indianapolis game that they probably should have lost because, it's an AFC opponent that doesn't really factor in too much in terms of playoff seeding. So it's going to be a difficult stretch for the Rams for sure. Hopefully they can stay healthy. To this point, they've been pretty good with that. Definitely going to figure out what this team is capable of and made of. But, based on how they've performed, I have no reason to believe that they won't, at the very least be competitive in these games, if not come out, in a pretty good position.
So looking, and we'll get you out of here soon, but looking at the Niners game specifically, Niners obviously very banged up. I mean, it seems like every week one of their players is put on the IR, another defensive player put on the IR this week, but it's in San Francisco. We did this show, the Rams were, what were they skinny? Like a 14-point favorite on that Thursday night game. I mean, it was like college football numbers, how crazy it was. And obviously we fell into that trap and, fell into this. What was it?
They're 4.5 for this game, something like that.
4.
I think it's 4.5. Yeah, currently.
Yeah. So, much more respectable line. I don't know why my camera keeps freezing, but much more respectable line. But you can hear me, right? Okay. I'll just switch to this camera. So, I mean, how do you feel going into this game? Because I fall in this trap all the time with Rams Niners. It's all, you never know. You can never call it division game, rivalry game. It always kind of plays out differently than we think. So just, how are you feeling about this game going into it?
Honestly, at this point, I'm starting to think I might be delusional because I'm optimistic. I think the Rams should absolutely take care of business in this game. I mean, just looking at, I think offensively, San Fran should have some success just based on how Kyle Shanahan is able to scheme up his offense versus, being very familiar with the Rams do on the defensive side of the ball. But I just look at that 49ers defense and it's, they're still playing hard. They're still a pretty good unit, but I don't know how you overcome the loss of so many of these players. And they're not just good players. They're top tier, all pro superstar players in terms of Fred Warner being out for this one versus for the last one he played.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously Nick Bosa's out and I believe he missed that game as well. And now they lose, Kyren Williams, another, first round edge rusher that they had. Of course, they added Keon White, but I mean, that unit is just something going on over there that's strange. So I think for the Rams, it's going to be difficult to travel, but I do ultimately think they should come out with a win here. And I feel pretty good about the chances that they do. I think back to that Philly game, that loss was just so brutal. Everyone, I feel like, felt like the Rams should have won that game or should have at least put themselves in a position to be ahead to win that game. And then I think about the way they came out in that game this season against Philadelphia. And there was just a different level of energy and like confidence. So you could see it. I felt it just hearing the guys and seeing the pregame stuff. So I would imagine that the loss to San Fran left a really bad taste in their mouths. That was one of the worst losses I could probably recall in the last 7 or 8 years that Sean McVay's been the head coach. So I imagine they'll have an extra set of motivation to really get out of this one and come out, with a hot start and really try to finish this one. So I do think the Rams are going to win, but I don't think by any means it's going to be an easy game. It never really is.
We were talking 13 personnel, and the 49ers nickel back is rookie Upton Stout, who's 5'8". That they should be able to take advantage of that matchup regularly in this next game. But one of the contributing factors in that loss was some kicking miscues, some special teams. You were on the record, get Cardi out, if I'm not wrong about your Twitter post. Is the kicker the answer for the Rams? If you're not familiar, they did sign another kicker for all of you listeners out there. He's called the thicker kicker. He's 5'11", 243 pounds. For reference point, I believe Omar Spates is also 243 pounds.
Yeah, slightly different builds. Yeah, that's right. Slightly different builds between the two, between him and Spates. But, jokes aside, I think what they probably, based on Sean McVay's comments, he said that they were going to have a kicking competition this week. And I guess whoever comes out of that is going to be the kicker for the San Fran game. I would imagine they still roll with Josh Carty for this week at least. And I think in terms of where the Rams are at right now, it makes sense to make this move and make some of these adjustments on the special team side of the ball, just because they're not a team that generally pulls the plug really quickly on these types of situations. Like you even see it with just underperforming players. Troy Reader, for example, played forever and fans are still, clamoring for him to never get a snap again. And he somehow always finds his way into relevance. They're just not a team to make these decisions quickly. So I imagine that this is partially the mental aspect of, kind of lighting that flame under Josh Carty and letting him know that, nobody's going to be bypass the accountability of this team. And then the other half of it too is just, I think it's just a strong and smart contingency place to have, contingency plan, I should say, to have in place, just because, if you go through another week or two and you continue to see these struggles, I think that's when they'll make the move. So I imagine that they'll still roll with Josh Carty this week. I could be wrong, of course. If he's not built of the right things, then potentially he's going to lose this competition throughout the practice week. And, we may never look back, but they add the kicker, they add Jake McQuaid back in the fold to snap the ball again on the special teams unit. And they still need to fix up that blocking unit, which is crazy to say this deep into the season, but it's crazy to think that that's the one thing that's held the Rams back the most this season. So
do you think at the very minimum they should go back to Ethan Evans on kickoffs and get Carty off the kickoff team?
You know what? I actually think that, to me at least, I think that's Josh Carty's saving grace right now. It has to be. Like, if you look at any metric right now based on, where opponents are starting after a kickoff in terms of yardage, the Rams are up there in terms of top 2, top 3. And I think back to that Philly game, he was the most important player arguably in that game. Like, the Eagles started every drive inside of their own 15, some of them inside of their own 10, which is absolutely unheard of on the kickoff this, in this day and age. So I would say that's the one thing that's probably kept him alive. If he was just your average prototypical, kick it out of the end zone, they start at the 30 type of thing or whatever, I would have pulled the plug a while ago. But I think that's the one thing that's probably kept him alive, to be quite honest with you. So I do recall that they used to have Ethan Evans kicking on kickoffs. I'm assuming that's probably just for stronger leg. I'm not for sure certain why that is, but there is also the theory that Pat McAfee did share in terms of, is that new squib style kick that he has on the kickoff, is that potentially messing with his form in terms of actual field goals and changing the trajectory, and potentially the reason as to why some of these kicks are being blocked? I don't know, but it is an interesting conversation to hear, especially from someone who's in the know as much as Pat McAfee is.
Yeah, and Jordan Rodriguez also backed that one up with kind of her take on it. She did a big story about special teams and the K-balls, all that. She's in that camp as well. Ethan Evans last week did take 5 of the kickoff attempts. So if there's a trend there, we'll see if that continues or not. But I guess we'll get you out of here on this. Let's have a score prediction for the big rivalry game with the evil Empire up north.
You know what? I'm going to say 27-20 for the Rams. I think the Niners will hang in there. I think the Rams should be able to cover the spread. I imagine the Rams should be able to hold them out of the end zone at least a couple times, even in the event of a sustained drive. I think they've played pretty well down there in the red zone. And then offensively, they've done a much better job in the red zone for sure, just getting on the same page between Stafford and Davante Adams. And I think that's just going to be something I'm going to watch for the rest of the season in terms of, it's difficult to cover that guy down there in the red zone. He's just so good in terms of his release package. If you speak to any receiver in the last 15 years who they studied the most, a lot of people are probably going to say Davante Adams just because of his ability to get off the ball in the line of scrimmage so cleanly. And that's what allows him to be so productive down there in that short, condensed area in the red zone. So I'm kind of looking at, like, do teams start to potentially vice him on the goal line here and shade, another defender that way? And if they do, then of course, then it's going to be a lot easier for the Rams to go find someone else down in the red zone or run the ball with, better numbers in the box type of thing. So I think the Rams will have a good game plan. I think they'll be able to win this game. I'm going to say 27-20. I'm sure I won't sound like an idiot here next week, hopefully.
I love it. I love it. I mean, hey, I think this is a much better Rams team right now than when they first met. And this Niners team is still holding it together, but is almost more injured than they even were then, which is crazy to say. Obviously, I mean, Fred Warner's just an unbelievable loss. It'll be huge and hard to overcome. So, all right, I do got one final one for you. So I try to do a Canadian trip now once a year. We went to Vancouver last year, so I'm hoping to go to Toronto soon. So where's the spot I'm going? What's the restaurant, the bar, whatever the local food eatery? Where am I heading to?
You know what? I'm so useless in this situation. For a guy that lives as close as I do to Toronto, I hardly go there. You should certainly go to Toronto, that's for sure. There's a wealth of options for you for sure in terms of restaurants and I guess nightlife and all kinds of stuff, which I try to avoid these days.
Or even just style of food. Like, what's a good style of food in your area? Is there a specific, like, this is what we're like, LA, we're known for like tacos, right? Like LA is like the taco capital of the USA. So
Ryan learned that Omaha is actually the home of the
Reuben, fantastic Reubens out in Omaha, Nebraska.
Reuben.
Yeah.
I'm from Nebraska. I didn't even know it was from there.
Yeah. I would have never guessed that.
Omaha. Yeah. The best.
Well, the benefit to you, I would say, is we are insanely multicultural here. So you can just about find anything that you want. I would say, some of the Middle Eastern food is pretty damn good. Same thing with any sort of Asian style cuisine, I would say, is really good there. Of course, you got a lot of Italians around my area as well. So if you're into not necessarily mixing it up a ton and want to go with one of the classics, you certainly can do that as well. I would say the one thing that we lack here the most, at least for me, being out in LA a couple times and stuff, is the Mexican food. Like we're polarizing, right now in terms of what you guys have available to you versus what we have.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there's so many options to choose from for sure.
Yeah, I mean, Toronto and that whole area is one of the biggest, metropolitan melting pots, if you will. So, so appreciate you as always, man. Last time you were on with me, I wasn't even doing the show with Skinny. He was here at LAFB, but not doing the show with me. I remember we had to pause mid-show because my daughter was like 1.5 years and was like climbing out of her crib next to me. And I had to like, hey, hang on, let me take a break here. And now she's 5 and at school and in kindergarten. So it's been too long. But great to see you. Great work as always. I know you're killing it over there at Underdog. Anyone can follow him at QB's MVP on Twitter, and hopefully we'll kind of get you back into the whole podcasting game here with this one. So thanks for the time, brother. Really appreciate you.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for having me, man. It's always fun to stop by and chop up some stuff about Rams ball.
Love it. Well, there you go, Ramley. We will be back with plenty more Rams coverage heading up to this big game against the Niners.